and I think it was like on the second hairpin going up Columbine, and I literally could not pedal. I got off my bike and I tried, stretching. I tried walking. I tried everything, and I could not ride.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race. It is a show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, freaks you out for the highest and the hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. This is the post-Leadville Trail 100 show, 2018 version, a follow-up to a day's worth of climbing, descending, eating, drinking, and suffering. And for the co-host of this show, LT and Fatty Nelson, it was more like a month's worth if we go back to his first trip this summer to Leadville. I'm Michael Houghton, a.k.a. Hottie, full of Leadville envy right now. I'm unable to make it this year, but really enjoyed following everyone on social media as they made their way around the Leadville course. I'll have to say, Fatty, I was up before the start, which for us West Coasters is an hour before Leadville time. So 6:30 gun time, 5:30 my time. I put on some coffee, turned on the Facebook Live feed to watch the world's best mountain bike group ride roll away from 6th and Harrison. And I'll have to say, I was pumped as you guys roll down 6th Street. But the question is, Fatty, after the Silver Rusch, Crusher, Breck Epic, were you pumped?
I was so pumped every single day from the 6 days of Breck Epic. I would have expected I would be utterly exhausted and frankly a little bit apathetic by the time I got to Leadville. But this race, the magic of it inspires me every single time, even though I had to drive out from Breckenridge and therefore had to get up at 3:30 Mountain Time to make it to this race on time. I was still awake well before the alarm went off, and just a rush of adrenaline as I got ready to do this race for the 22nd start and hopefully the 21st finish.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you are now a 22-time starter of the Leadville Trail 100, 20 times a finisher, and twice a Breck Epic Leadville back-to-backer.
Yeah.
Here's how long you folks raced out there in Leadville. I was able to watch you roll out of town, then make breakfast, waste some time on the internet, dress, get on my road bike, go for a 60-mile ride with climbing, stop for coffee, come home, shower, sit down, and follow online Fatty and several other Leadville racers as they made their way home. That is one long day in the saddle.
Oh, you make me wish I would have gone a little bit faster. You push you a little bit. 7 long days in the saddle for me, of course. And I do have to say, I was exhausted even as I did the first little bit of the race. And as I went up the stairs, or down a set of stairs, I wondered if I would be able to do Leadville at all, whether I would be able to do the Columbine climb, whether I would be able to do the Powerline climb. One thing I didn't have to worry about, though, was whether I was going to miss a shift. I want to talk about Shimano for a second before we get into the long day of riding. By the time I got to Leadville, I had been racing for 6 days already, had never had to charge my Shimano XT-Di2, and I had quite literally never missed a single shift, and nor had my wife, Lisa, who had also been doing, as part of the co-ed duo team I was in at Breck Epic, she had never missed any shifts either. And that's something when you are doing that kind of race. There were a lot of people who were stronger, faster, better riders than either of us who would be coming down and then having to suddenly go all the way into their granny gear because of an abrupt and unexpected change in the terrain. And bam, they were off their bikes. Lisa and me cruised by a lot of people just by virtue of a really great drivetrain. Also, braking. I think I've talked not too much, Hottie, about how great the shifting is with the XT Di2, but just XT brakes, they are fantastic. 7 days of racing, neither Lisa nor I ever had any issues at all, period, with our brakes. Just fantastic braking from Shimano. Kudos to them.
So you're telling me, did you race Leadville as well on the single charge that you started with at Breck Epic?
Yes. I charged both of our bikes, and in my case, and we'll get to it in just a second, both of my bikes because I have a hardtail and a full suspension, but charged them before we left. And I brought the chargers, but I never needed to because our batteries always stayed at the full charge on the display. Never felt the need to charge in between days. So Breck Epic plus Leadville, never brought out the chargers.
Mm-hmm. Same charge, same brake pads, same bat channel. That is Shimano. Go to bike.shimano.com for more. We will also have a link in the show notes for this episode at the Leadville100podcast.com.
That's right. And Shimano wonderfulness notwithstanding, I should say I did have some really serious mechanical issues on stage 5 of the Breck Epic. And I think it's worth talking about because it did affect what I would be riding in Leadville. The Breck Epic is a very different kind of race than Leadville. And I am not one of the kinds of people who subscribe to the which is better discussion, because I think, any kind of race can be awesome, but Breckenridge is definitely a way more technical and full body demanding experience. You're doing it for 6 days, right? Day 5 is an extremely difficult push, a hike a bike for what felt like hours, followed by an extremely difficult, technical, rocky descent. Did okay with that until 2 miles before the final aid station, at which point, and I really do not know why, and I've talked with a number of people who should be able to say, well, here's what you did wrong, and no one had a here's what you did wrong, but my rear derailleur hanger just sheared. It just came off. Suddenly my rear wheel was locked up because, of course, and no longer attached to my bike. My rear derailleur got sucked up into and the chain's flopping around, and I stopped. And working with a guy from Kenya who also happened to be in the exact same spot fixing a tire, he and I worked together and singulated my bike, and kind of found out pretty quickly that doesn't work so great with a full suspension bike. It's the first time I had tried doing that. Have you ever tried doing that, Hottie?
No, when I broke my derailleur hanger, I walked out. That's what I did.
I would have saved time by doing that. It immediately started hunting, going up and down the cassette, just, with every bounce. And it went up the cassette, chain snapped. I put the chain back in my jersey pocket, walked and coasted the rest of the way down to the aid station, where some really great guys sort of made it their mission. There was neutral mechanical support at the aid station, and they made it their goal to get me back on the bike so that I could ride the final 7 miles of this of this day, so that I would be able to say I did the entirety of the Breck Epic. And they actually moved the gears around on the cassette until they got a good tension on the chain. I took off. Things were going pretty well, and I got a little cocky, and I started pushing harder and and going up, riding up hills instead of walking up hills. And for some reason, maybe hit a bump, maybe some other reason, who knows. The chain hunted up the cassette, and the tension was so great that I snapped my chainstay.
Oof.
Yep, broke it.
On a full suspension bike?
On a full suspension bike, it just cracked the chainstay. It was such a loud, almost explosive, percussive sound. Lisa, who was, I would say probably at that moment, maybe 50 feet behind me, she screamed, and and I got off, and she thought that that I must have fallen and hit something loud or hard myself, but no, my chainstay just snapped.
Wow.
And after that, it took me about 15 minutes to, because the tension was still incredible, and with the chainstay broken, of course, the wheel was twisted in and would not turn at all. So it took me 15 minutes to even get the axle out, and then I could take move the wheel forward, take the chain off, put the axle back in, and then walk in a soggy chamois because it was a nice hot day, and in my mountain bike shoes for, I'm going to guess, 3 to 4 miles.
Ooh.
In rocky, rooty single track that would have been awesome to ride, but was no fun at all to walk. But we did finish. We finished the day very slow, and I had 2 more days of mountain biking, including the last day of the Breck Epic, and then Leadville. So that's that's kind of the long, shortish version of my story of what led up to why I was riding as a geared but hardtail at the Leadville 100.
And why, when you're on a 7-day mountain bike excursion, if you can, you bring at least 2 bikes.
Yes.
Because it certainly worked out for you this time.
Oh, it sure did. Never had to get out the single speed, but I did. In the end, I wound up riding my hardtail 3 days out of my 7 days of racing.
Okay. So let's go to day 7 then. And the namesake of the show, and that's the Leadville Trail 100.
Yep.
And talk about your day. We're going to talk about your day in total, but there's some general things that I drew from the race from afar that I wanted to ask you about. First of all, one of the things I've been picking up on as I read a lot of posts now is the course itself seemed to be slower than normal, that it was dusty and soft out.
And the day was warm, yeah.
And it was warm, but how did the course roll for you?
I would say that hot and dusty were very, very good descriptors of the day. Especially up at the top of Columbine, there was due to a reroute, and there was either property rights or political reasons, or I'm not exactly sure why, but there was a slight course reroute that meant that most people had to walk sooner and had to walk more often than normal. So getting to the top of Columbine was a harder thing to do, which meant that you were at altitude a little bit longer. And we've talked about altitude before. The longer you're at altitude, the worse it, above 12,000 feet, which is where most of that was with this reroute and the more walking. That's not great for your time. And
it sounded like these slow course conditions became apparent a lot sooner than Columbine. I mean, I saw your time to the pipeline feed outbound was 2 hours, 5 minutes. I know you were thinking of sub-9 to make sub-9. You got to get to the pipeline outbound in about $1.50, somewhere in there, usually, if you're on pace to break 9 hours. I heard from other people who said, yeah, I lost 5 minutes just getting to Carteret outbound, which is a lot that early in the race. People were saying, 10, 15 minutes they were losing just in that first leg alone. So the course was showing its hand early on that it was not going to be a fast track, it seemed like.
Yeah, it seemed like there were a lot of people who were feeling that. It got warm early, and there was a sort of a loose and soft feel to the course. Also, where you were in the field made a difference. I was lucky enough to start in the red corral, and so St. Kevin's wasn't a problem for me. My wife, Lisa, who was in the green corral, as well as my stepdaughter, Melissa, who was in the green corral riding with her mom, they said that things were very slow right at the beginning. That knot of people that forms was really a problem. There was a lot more walking much earlier in the race.
Now, this reroute. Now let's go to this reroute. That's another thing I've seen a lot of people comment about so far is this reroute. Now, for the folks who know the course, take us to where this reroute is and what it did to you.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we've talked about during the podcast before, there is a moment going up Columbine that you feel that everything changes, where you suddenly are above tree line and you can see the turnaround point, even though it is forever away. And you can see, this almost disappearing into the horizon line of people slowly riding or walking. That is usually a place where you can keep riding, albeit in your granny and very slowly. This year, just beyond where it forks and you usually go left, now you got to go. This year you had to go right instead, and it was loose and it was narrow, and it was very nerve-wracking whether you were going up or down it, just because that two-way traffic was really sandwiched close together.
Okay. Was there damage to the course up there? Was there any reason given? Did you ever find out?
No, it goes back to I hear that there were property rights dispute or some kind of grievance. I honestly don't know. I didn't get into that. It's not something I could affect. It just seemed that the way we normally went was off limits this year.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, due to the conditions of the dirt and the high temperatures, it seemed like times were also off this year or slower this year. In fact, it's been kind of a trend going on here. I went back and looked at the finishing times and a number of gold buckles handed out over the years. I went back about 10 years, and 10 years ago, 114 entrants got a gold buckle. As we get into the post-Lance years, the numbers really start to pick up. Like the year he won, there's 128 given out. But by 2013, when I gold buckled, 361 gold buckles were given out. I don't remember that to be a particularly fast year, but we had like a banner year there for gold buckles. Yeah. Since then, the numbers have steadily declined, and this year in particular, it was back down to about 237 gold buckles. So over those, what do you draw out of that over the last 10 years of being where you've been there for 22 years now? What do you think is going on here?
Well, following the years where Lance did it and Floyd did it and Levi Leipheimer did it. And I think that really drove a lot of aspiring, very strong racers for several years to go and do it. I think since then, it has leveled off and perhaps even dropped off. The people who were, these neo-pros or aspiring pros or even experts who wanted to do what these American pros had done and sort of measure themselves against that they've had their chance. And now we're maybe leveling off to where it is people who want to have an adventure and want to do something really difficult, that measure themselves against this iconic race. And I think that the spike of professional excitement is it is sloped off, and maybe we're plateaued at where the number of gold buckles ought to be, right? Where it is in the high 200s, mid 200s. Maybe that's where it's going to stay from now on. Who knows? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I think you're spot on there. Certainly my gold buckle year 2013 was right at the pinnacle, the peak of all that madness that the pro riders brought, that the guys out of the pro peloton brought to the race. Everyone was very excited. There was a lot of gung-ho mentality about it. And since then, I think it's mellowed out a little bit. Breaking Albin Licata's record, will that ever happen? I mean, even Dave Wiens thought, it probably will, because records just get broken. But
sure.
It's just not going to come. The numbers aren't going to fall like we saw them falling beginning in 2008, 2009, as far as the faster times are concerned. Howard Grotz came across. He won it for the second year in a row. Larissa Connors was the female winner, but they didn't lay down any crazy time. I mean, they were 6 hours, 20 minutes. She was 7-something. Those are great times, obviously, but nothing that makes you blow your mind. And then some of the other good, strong riders there that I checked times on, yeah, they put down great times, but nothing that really kind of blew you away or really jumped out. So, I mean, I think you're spot on there. I think more folks who now see it as a bucket list thing and fewer of the racers are actually targeting this race, and that's why we're not seeing the number of gold buckles get handed out there anymore.
And in a way, I think that's as it should be. This started out as a people's race, and the excitement for and by pros that it certainly hasn't gone, but it perhaps has settled and has become once again, as it, rightly so, a people's race.
Mm-hmm. And it shows they don't have to make the course any harder.
No.
It is hard already.
Plenty
They
hard.
just had some really good guys show up for a number of years, and they did their thing. So
Absolutely.
that's fine. So we're going to hear about your race coming up here. But first, we want to get more into your equipment choices, of course, and how they went for you, starting with our great sponsor, Envy.
Yeah, let's talk about Envy for a second. I raced every single day on Envy M525s, whether it was on my Specialized Epic or on my Felt Doctrine. It was always on M525s, and that means really with one set of tires, both for Breck and for Leadville, riding at 20 PSI. Guess how many flats I had during the week between Breck and Leadville?
Well, Breckenridge, you should, I would think the mean there, the flat mean, if there's such a stat kept, I would figure a flat per week per rider would be about right.
Yeah,
I mean, some guys are going to get more, some guys are going to get 3, some are going to get none, but I would think you're probably down for a flat, I would say.
Yeah, I would have expected 2, and I would have been happy to say, yeah, I got 1 flat, I got 2 flats. I got 0 flats, including in this cascading disaster I had with coming down Wheeler that I told you about already. Guess how many flats Lisa got?
Well, then she must have had 1. If you didn't,
Nope.
I mean, somebody's going to be unlucky.
Not even 1. So yeah, between Lisa and me, both riding M525s for a total of 14 days in race conditions, and between us riding, climbing, I think our total was around 44,000 feet of climbing. And I don't even remember how many hours it was, but all around 350 miles each, around 40,000 feet of climbing each, 0 flats. And that is going, both of us at around, she was at around 20 PSI. I was around 22 PSI. I was riding lower pressure than you would expect. The fact is, the way that they have done their rims means just a really great wheel. I bottomed out my rims against my tires. I don't even know how many times. Still just no flats. These rims, I won't say won't and don't ever push through a tire, but it takes a lot more to do so. And there were a lot of people having flats on coming down power line, as you see every year. It's just that the confidence these wheels inspire, just incredible. I love these things.
That was one of the points of the 525 is the M50 was a great wheel. I've got a set of M50s. They're fabulous wheels.
They are.
Why mess with that if you can't make it better? Well, they did. And they said, look, we think we can make it a little more flat-proof, I should say. We can make it a little lighter, obviously. Everyone's always into that. Make it ride a little bit better. And that's exactly what they did with the 525. So if you want to find out more about all of Envy's wheels and components, many of which seem like they're made with the Leadville Trail 100 in mind, but can handle pretty much anything you throw at them, any terrain, including what you might find in Breckenridge, as Fatty found out the past week, just go to check them out, Envy. That's ENVE.com. Okay, Envy. Thanks again, Envy, for looking after us, looking after Fatty and the Hammer.
Great sponsor.
And putting good wheels and putting good handlebars into their hands, too. So I want to thank Envy for backing this show as well. All right, now, back to Leadville. Let's go over your day. Let's get a blow-by-blow from start line to finish line of how your day went. Take us to 6:20, 6:30, wherever you want in the morning, and go.
I will try to be reasonably brief, and that's difficult for me. I am famous for my 12-part blog post race recaps, but I will say that as I already mentioned, we had to get up at 3:30 in the morning since we were starting from Breckenridge, driving out to where my stepson and stepdaughter were. They've been living in Leadville, so we at least had a headquarters there. I got to the start line, the latest I have in 22 years of start lines, Hottie. I got
Yeah.
there at 6:15, only 15 minutes until the race start. Frankly, it makes my gut clench even thinking about that. But I just hadn't paid enough attention to my watch. I'm not used to starting from so far away. But in the end, it was just fine. I got there, had 10 minutes to spare, had my GPS. I recently got a Garmin 1030. Love it, by the way. Best GPS I've ever had. Ate a bonk breaker bar. Not talking about the feed yet, but that is where I got it from. And, my favorite flavor, salted caramel. And ate that and liked it so much that I got out another. And so started the morning with 400 calories in me, because that's how much of those, 200 calories each.
That was breakfast? Two bonk breaker bars?
No, I had some
You
eggs.
had to have your avocado and egg and bacon thing, didn't you?
Yep. Ate that on the way from Breckenridge.
Okay.
Yeah, sort of a breakfast burrito on the way down. But
All right.
a couple extra 100 calories right before the race. The gun went off. There was a lot of fog. Starting in the Red Corral as I did, there was no challenge or issue or even urgency. The nervousness that I usually feel in the field, it wasn't there. It was very, very nice. Meanwhile, in the Green Corral, just one corral back, Lisa said that it was very nervous and antsy, and that accordion effect right at the first bottoming out of the pavement, that there was all of that. A corral makes a real difference in your experience of the first couple of miles, Hottie. Up St. Kevin's, things were pretty nice. I saw a couple of friends, said hi to them. One guy recognized the Fat Cyclist jersey, said hi. I looked back to see who it was and rode off the road on St. Kevin's and into a ditch.
Oh, yeah?
So, my first mistake very, very early in the race. I had
Did it bring you to a halt?
Yeah, absolutely. I had to get off my bike. It wasn't like a 6-foot deep ditch, but there is just sort of a running gutter, almost you could say, down the left side of St. Kevin's for a water line, and I went into that. It was just a really dumb mistake that cost me, I don't know, a minute or two, probably less than a minute. I hauled my bike back out. People were very good about giving me a space to get started again, and I was back at it. All the way up to the pavement, to the Carter's turn on the pavement.
You caught my ear here. Fog.
Okay.
Was the fog all the way up Kevin's?
Once you turn left and start the real climb, there wasn't too much of it. But before you make that turn onto the Kevin's climb, or before the turn on Kevin's climb, that field was just covered with a very eerie, sort of ghostly fog. I've seen that once or twice before, but it made for a pretty cold start, and that cold would not last. The day got warm very quickly.
Yeah. So you hit the pavement. Mm-hmm. The Kevin's climb went, status quo for you? Faster? How did you feel there?
Perception is such a weird thing. I felt like I had my legs felt like I had been going for 70 miles by the time I'd been going 10. I was so exhausted and tired, and I was starting to think, I'm going to just have to sort of get through this day. I don't have any power in my legs. But when I look at Strava, I had a pretty much ordinary average time. Not my best time, but certainly not my worst. It's funny how perception really changes. It doesn't have a lot to do with your time.
And dust. Now we can start talking about the dirt, because we had these loamy, dusty, fluffy conditions, and that was evident on Kevin's.
Not as far as where I was. It was pretty clear. Didn't really notice that so much until we got on Hagerman's. But Hagerman's was as washboardy as I have ever seen it. Just almost impossible to find a smooth line. And it was very dusty. You could tell it was in your eyes, and your tires felt softer than they actually were very early into the race. And I was really, I was hunting all over for a good line, having a rough time finding it. But I did meet Etienne. You remember from the very long course episode, bonus episode you and I did, where we introduced the episode by talking about Etienne, who it turns out is from Belgium and is a super nice guy and also extremely fast. He came blowing by me, told me to climb, to get on his wheel. I did, and he said, "Oh, I love your podcast," or something like that. And I said, "What's your name?" He says, "Etienne." And I said, "The Etienne?" I felt like I had met someone super famous. It was exciting, out of, there are 2,000 of us, and I'm winding up riding behind this guy who had emailed us about doing this show episode. So that was really cool. I couldn't hold his wheel for very long. He was gone. So I would see him again, and it would not be under quite as nice circumstances. So maybe we'll try to get back to that. See if you can remind me too. Anyway, my descent down power line, I don't know if I've ever had as pleasant on race day of a descent down the power line. Yeah, it was just really nice. And here's what it came down to. I lucked into getting behind a woman who, and I wish I could have learned her name, but after the descent, I never saw her again during the race. But she either had a gift or a real experience for riding very smoothly and picking a really good line, but her speed wasn't such that I couldn't keep her in sight. And so, as you know, I'm not a brilliant descender. And so being behind someone who rode really confidently and really well was a real pleasure. It just made it so that I did not feel like I had as much to be concerned about. I didn't have to spend time line hunting. It seemed like she knew exactly what she was doing. So I'm trying to remember. I think she was wearing a green kit and had an orange bike. That doesn't help much, but if you're out there, thanks from the guy who was on your wheel for the entirety that you didn't even know existed and was following you for the entirety down the power line. It was really great.
Yeah. Did you find more of these conditions there though on the descent? Was it fluffy, dirty? Was there a lot of dust to deal with, or how was the power line descent from that matter?
Power line was a little bit looser than normal, but the line, by the time I got to it, was very well defined, and I was able to stay on it without too much challenge. The dusty loose stuff didn't really happen until after, you do of course, at the bottom of power line, you hit the pavement. I got into a good line, and by the time I think I only had to rotate through maybe once or twice because it was such a big group. But once you got off right before pipeline, for the rest, until you got back on the pavement on the way back in, it was going to be loose and dusty and just, pretty soft for the whole rest of the day. Mm-hmm.
So you get in some good pace lines, headed across the pavement.
Yeah.
Past the trout fishery and on your way to the pipeline feed zone. At what point now do you start becoming aware of time?
I tried... I looked at pipeline at my GPS at pipeline, and I noticed that I was right at about 204, 205, and I thought to myself, that doesn't seem like a sub 9 to me. That seems like I am looking at a 905, 910, but I also knew that a lot can happen in the Columbine climb, that the Columbine and then power line on the way back are really the contests in the race, and the rest is getting to those next points without being exhausted, without burning all of your matches. And so I was working from the perspective that this year my objective was to race for 7 days straight rather than to get a sub 9. That said, I was pretty aware that I was nowhere close to setting any records on any Strava segments.
Yeah. Well, you're right. 2 hours, 5 minutes to pipeline feed. On paper, if you're making your splits out the night before, you're not putting 205 down to get a gold buckle. You're putting 150 down, somewhere in there. Now, that said, the course is running slow. Maybe there's time to be made up somewhere else. So we're on the pipeline now, the stretch from what some people call the flat stretch. It's not. It's a rolling stretch. It takes you from pipeline feed all the way over to Twin Lakes, including a section of single track. What happens in there? Do you find people to work with in there?
Briefly, but that is one section where it seems like people pass me more often than I am passed. And so I use that as a good opportunity to really fuel a lot, get a lot of food into me so that I have some energy for Columbine, because I know that is where I generally excel on the climb up Columbine. And I also know that if I am not well fueled and well hydrated, that it is impossible to excel up the Columbine.
Mm-hmm. So you hit Twin Lakes, and going into this race, you were unsure about your feeding situation. What did you work out in the end? I mean, I heard talk of neutral support maybe for you. What did you work out in the end? Yeah,
it's kind of funny how unprepared we went to. We got to this race considering how we normally do it, and I was willing to be. To do neutral support or just do drop bags this year. That said, when it came right down to it, I wound up with a host of friends taking care of Lisa and me. It was fantastic. Dave Thompson, who was also racing the Breck Epic, it turns out that he had an extra day after Breck that he was willing to take care of us. Lisa's best riding buddy, Amber, also willing to help us. A good friend of the fatcyclist.com community, Jeff Diefenbach, he was willing to, in addition to the support he was lending, some of his friends also support us. And then Melissa's boyfriend and good friend also willing to support us. So we had a lot of people around us taking care of us. So things actually went great. And it was we were well supported the entire race.
So I want to go through the feeds. Did you take a feed at Pipeline?
No.
And so you went straight to Twin Lakes for your feed, and you picked it up at your normal spot, that what you would call the first alternate feed zone.
Yeah. But we did the one right before the actual feed zone.
Right.
There's the alternate, there's the regular, and then there's the alternate that you like to use. We do the one right before the actual feed zone just because that's kind of our traditional spot.
Yeah.
And so
it's right before the dam, before you actually cross the dam that takes you past Twin Lakes. That's where the fatty feed zone is, and the hottie feed zone is well past there.
Yeah,
it's at the foot of Columbine.
Yep, either one works great. This one is just one that we've traditionally used, and so it was easy to use, or easy to find, therefore easy to use, and that worked out great for us. And up to that point, I should say that I did use a Camelback for the first time in many years, and really enjoyed using that. I did the Morton. I had, I think, 640 calories of Morton in the Camelback, and just swapped it out for a different Camelback for going up to Columbine. Okay,
so you went Camelback to Camelback, and then now we're out of Twin Lakes. Again, are you checking times at Twin Lakes? Do you know where you stand?
I did. I looked and saw that I was, I think, had done about my normal 45 minutes or so, and it made me think that I had a chance of getting to the top of Columbine at 4:30, and that is when I do my true first, this is for reals check. If I get to Columbine at this turnaround at Columbine at 4:30, I know that I am very likely to get sub 9. If I get there closer to 5, well, honestly, I'm going to finish closer to 10 is kind of how it's always been for me.
Right. So, and then physically, how are you doing at this point?
I'm having fun is really how I'm doing. I'm thinking my legs.
Well, that's mentally.
Yeah.
But physically, are your legs responding like you think they should? No. Okay.
Very.
So you're having to manage this 6 days of Breck Epic and the additional racing you did before. At this point, you're in physical management mode.
Yeah, I'm taking care of myself, thinking, okay, it's more important that I finish this than that I have a good first half. And so I was treating it as something where I needed to keep my speed at, it's something that I could do all day. I've blown up going up Columbine before, and I didn't want to do it again. Someone should cue the ominous music, because that's that's what's about
physically,
to happen.
Okay. Mentally, you're actually doing very good, which is great. I mean, sometimes you can overcome these things. You never know. So you pull out of Twin Lakes, and we're off to the meadow, through the meadow, and then that right turn onto the big wide dirt road headed towards Columbine. Now what?
Well, I see. I just get through very nicely without, going into my granny gear probably more often than I would like to, really feeling my legs a lot more than I would like to. I see Yuri right at the base of Columbine, the climb. Say hi to him. He gives me a little push. So, appreciate the 2 seconds he bought me there. And up I go. And that is where I started feeling like, okay, now's when I do the thing that I'm good at, and I get into my standing climbing rhythm, and I'm going, and I feel like I am doing okay. And then I start getting that weird telltale twinge. You know what I'm talking about, right? When you haven't cramped yet, but you can feel that a cramp is coming. And so you slow down and maybe gear into something easier, and you're trying out different things, and it just wouldn't happen. I just, everything I did just felt like, no, that's making it worse. And, I try standing up, I try sitting down, I try going to a harder gear, try going to an easier gear, and then left and right hamstrings, bam, locked up tight. I was stuck. I think it was like on the second hairpin going up Columbine, and I literally could not pedal. I got off my bike, and I tried, stretching. I tried walking. I tried everything. And I could not ride. And that might be a good moment to talk about the feed, because I had a pickle juice. I also had several of the electrolyte capsules, and took them, and those helped somewhat. However, they did not. It took, I think, 12 minutes before I felt like I could ride again. It was rough, and I was incredibly aware of time during that moment. I was looking at my GPS and thinking to myself, I am watching my sub-9 disappear right now. I went from the thinking that maybe I can get a sub-9 to sub-9 is now impossible. And it wasn't the right mindset. I'm not one to teach much about, here's the way you ought to think when you were racing Leadville. Or maybe I am, I don't know. But being positive is a lot more helpful than being negative and beating yourself up. It costs energy to do that, but that's what I was doing. And so I was kind of getting into my own personal funk, my dark place. Nevertheless, after 12 minutes or so, and I know it's 12 minutes because I look at my Strava flyby, and I was able to start riding again, and expected that I would go, like 10 feet and have the problem plague me again. Weirdly enough, cramps did not hit me again the whole rest of the day. It was just 12 minutes of really, really bad, a really bad moment. So, Was it?
You put something in your gut to help out, right?
Yeah,
that's good.
The pickle juice. I think that helped. The electrolyte capsules, I think those helped. And as I was saying, I was sucking on, and nursing the Morton 320 that I had in my Camelback. I had 640 calories once again in this Camelback, and I am, getting those into me. And, in a way, maybe that time being still and getting calories and fluid into me again is maybe what I needed. Maybe because I did that, I was able to do okay. So, bad things happen. Recovering is a great idea. And kudos to the feed, I would say, as always, for great products that, did they get me out of this? I don't know. I think so. But I know that I was in a bad shape before I sort of refueled and restocked myself.
Yeah, that's why, we brought the feed on board. That's why we share them with our listeners, because they can help you have your greatest day and they can save your day with what they deliver in their nutrition packs. And our podcast listeners can get a great price on the training and racing packs that they provide. They're custom curated for Leadville racers. Go to thefeed.com/Leadville for the race pack. There's a link on that page. You get a training pack as well. And be sure to use the code Leadville15 for a 15% discount on either of those boxes.
Yep, absolutely. Good stuff for sure. And we're going to transition now, kind of, in a way, to another one of our sponsors, Banjo Brothers. It was shortly after I got rolling again that, we're sort of getting all of our sponsors into the story here, but this is just the way it happened, folks. I'm rolling again. Things are going okay. I'm surprised that my legs feel actually pretty good. I am starting to repass people, and a guy I passed said, "Hey, do you got a CO2 canister I can take?" And I knew, because I had 3 20-gram CO2s, including one in my Banjo Brothers pack, seat bag, that, I could give him one. And so I unzipped that, handed it to him, and started riding again. And he said to me, and this is a question I have for you, what you would have answered. He said, "Can I have your CO2 adapter too?" What would you have answered?
Well, that's like asking a smoker, "Can I have a cigarette?" And you go, "Yeah, sure." And you go, "Can I have your lighter too?" You go, "No, what am I supposed to do?" I mean, come on, right? So I know it's a weird analogy. Sorry, folks. Mixing smoking and cycling together, but just came to mind. Anyhow, obviously, you got to hold on to your nozzle. You can give out CO2s if you got extra tubes. I've done this too. You give out tubes, but you do draw the line somewhere, don't you? No matter what you have in your Banjo Brothers bag, you got to draw the line.
And that's what I did. I have wondered since then. It's like, well, someone had gave me his multi-tool once and it would have made it so he couldn't have changed his tire. But I wasn't thinking like that. I said, no, if I give you my CO2 adapter, then I can't fix a flat. As it turns out, I guess I could have given it to him because, for my 7th straight day, I didn't have a flat. But no, I didn't. But I did give him a CO2. And I had not lost my adapter as he had, because my seat pack did not come apart and drop all of its stuff. So, Banjo Brothers, don't lose your stuff during your race.
Right. And I've seen it happen. I've had it happen to me, folks, with a cheapskate bag. It came flying open and left everything on a trail in bear country somewhere, and I wasn't in the mood to go back. So I just stayed out there with the bears. Don't lose your stuff. That way, not only can you fix your own flat, you might be able to bail out a buddy. Banjo Brothers are tough, practical, and affordable, Minneapolis-based. Fatty uses them. I use them. In business since 2003. To get 20% off your order, go to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites.
Ought to say Hottie-favorites, too.
Well, you're the guy.
We're
You're the
guys.
original. You're the OG.
In any case, we're big fans of the company as well as the products that they make. So once I got past the point where Ken is, and I talked about this already. Ken always sort of parks his ATV where there's the tree line. that's where walking normally starts happening. And different people walk at different points in the race. But with that reroute, you have to do a little bit more walking, and you have to do it sooner. And the descent, it was dustier and way looser than it usually is. And so by the time I got to the turnaround, and I'm not looking at Strava right now, I'm working off my memory of looking at my GPS. I think it was at around 450, which put me put me 20 minutes behind my turnaround, the turnaround time I needed if I wanted a sub 9. Mm-hmm. And that made me a little bit disappointed, right? I told myself, I told lots of people that sub 9 was not my objective. But, you kind of want to do, you kind of want to be as fast as you were the last time you tried. You still want to be the fast guy. You don't want to be slower than you were last year. And so I was a little bit disheartened. But as I came down, just a few minutes later, I saw Lisa. And she yelled for me, just go, honey, something like that. I don't remember exactly what, your mind scrambled as you head down. And I remembered, I was like, that's what this part of the race is supposed to be. People who are going down need to be yelling for the people who are coming up. We are supposed to be encouraging our fellow racers. And it was like a light had switched for me. I was like, I had forgotten the spirit of this race. And from there on, I took that up. I made that my mission. As I was going down, I was yelling, I was cheering for people, I was saying, you're doing it, you are racing Leadville, this thing trying to be brief, because of course all they ever hear is, and they don't know what you're saying. But they do know that you're yelling and that you're being positive. And I saw a lot of smiles as I was doing that, and it made me feel good again. And I was thinking, you know what? Sub 9, 9:30, whatever. I am in Leadville, Colorado. I'm doing this race that I care a lot about and have done for 2 decades. And a lot of people, have spent their whole, since Christmas, working on getting out here. I'm going to encourage them. And I do. And I feel so much more happy after I do that. It is just, my spirits really lifted, and I kind of stopped worrying about sub 9, and I developed this new plan. As I'm going down, I'm thinking, Lisa was not that far behind me. And I know that Melissa also, that she couldn't be too far behind me either. And I was thinking, what if when I get to the goo tent, if I stop and I wait for them to come, and the 3 of us ride it together, and it'll be a happy family experience. And that sounds really, that sounds like that might be, kind of a fun new plan B for the race. And I think to myself, I'm not thinking very straight, so I'm going to check with Yuri, who is this sort of trusted racer advisor guru that I really look up to. And I knew he was at the goo tent. So I stop at the tent and I say, hey, Yuri, I'm not thinking super straight, but I have this new plan. I think sub 9 is behind me. I don't think I can get it now. How about if I stay here, and when Lisa comes, she and I ride the rest of the race together? And Yuri gave me some fantastic advice. He said, Fatty, this isn't a family ride. It's an effing race. And I go, oh. And there was a guy standing beside him. I didn't know who he was. But he goes, that's right. This is an effing race. And I said, you're right. This is an effing race. And I took off, and I think sometimes those of us who are racing, we need someone who can tell us and remind us, the rest of the day, the rest of the year, ride together. But when you're at a race, remember, it's an effing race. And for the rest of the day, whenever I would start to slow down, I heard Yuri in my head. He was like, this is an effing race. And if you look at my times for Strava for the rest of the day, they're markedly faster than my first half. Markedly faster.
Mm-hmm. So that was the last you saw of Lisa?
I'm afraid it was. That was the last I saw of Lisa, and I didn't even see Melissa as I was coming down from Columbine. There are a lot of people that I didn't see, even though a lot of people were really gracious about, yelling, "I love the podcast," or "I like the blog," or whatever. You see them, you see people, you yell for people, but you don't have a lot of time, and you got to keep your eyes on the trail. So I didn't see them again. I went after the rest of the race with a really renewed intensity. I saw a guy in a skin suit, an orange skin suit. His name was Corey. He said he loved the blog, or the podcast, I should say. I gave him a little pull. Saw him again going up the power line. He was having a rough time. I said, "Get on your bike and ride," and he did. I don't know why, what new authority or exertion or power I had, but he obeyed. I got a free drink of water on going up the power line from the guy who wears the pizza outfit. His name, it turns out, is Brandon. I saw Etienne again. He looked like he was about to collapse into the dirt. He had found out exactly how bad the power line can be to a person. But his daughter was actually on the power line and was walking up with him. And I thought that was really cool.
Where did you run into Etienne again? How far up?
As I was hiking up the power line, he and I walked up the power line together, or at least, the hiking part of the power line.
Yeah, the lower section, yeah.
Yeah. And after that, I didn't get off my bike again. Apart from that first little marching part, I rode the rest of the thing, never put a foot down again. I was on a mission from there, Hottie. It was, it was good to have, that. Even if I wasn't going to get a sub 9, it was good to have the race intensity back.
So you knew for sure the sub 9 was gone even before you got back to Pipeline?
A lot of people were asking me that exact question. Do we have a chance at sub 9? And boy, you would think that with so many of these under my belt that I would be able to give a great prediction at any point. And I gave a pretty reasonable one. I said, and I sort of waved, at any point you could see 20 people in the race. I said, I bet someone that we can see will finish under 9 hours. But they're going to have an amazing day going up power line. And they're going to need to have an amazing day going up the pavement, the May Queen pavement. And they're going to need to have an amazing time going up the boulevard. You forget that there are those 3 climbs in the final 25 miles of the race. What didn't occur to me is that I would have an amazing final 3 climbs and descent and amazing descents in there, and that as I was coming down Sugarloaf and onto Hagerman's, it occurred to me, I am having a really good second half of the race. And I started revising my mental math and saying to myself, I think it might be possible for me to get a sub 9. I think that I should start working toward a sub 9 again. And I put in, I don't know if I would say the fastest effort I've ever put in, but maybe one of the hardest efforts I have ever put in the final 25 miles of that race. I climbed power line with everything I had. And I climbed the pavement, the May Queen pavement, with everything I had and passed so many people. And I came down St. Kevin's with all the, considering that I was on a hardtail instead of the full suspension I had hoped, I think one of the faster times I've ever had, and just blasted up the boulevard. However, I could see as I went up the boulevard toward the final mile or so, on the GPS, it turned over and there was the 9, and I knew I hadn't got it. And there was a moment where I was like, that's it. I haven't got sub 9. And then I thought, so what? I missed sub 9. I missed that, that magical mark. I'm not going to get the big buckle. However, I haven't missed if I go my hardest, I will still be faster than if I go easy now. And I just really pushed it. And I will post along with in the show notes for this episode some of the photos that they put up on that Lifetime takes as part of your for every racer. Some of my finish line crossing photos. They show a man in pain. And the very best kind of pain. The pain of, I have given this absolutely everything I had and perhaps a little bit more, and I'm going to feel pretty bad for another half hour or whatever. But I've crossed in 9 hours and 5 minutes and 1 second. And if I hadn't had those cramps, maybe I would have got an 8:55. Who knows? Mm-hmm. And who cares? I've got big buckles. I've got small buckles. But what I had in the end was an incredibly intense race experience. And also I met a lot of podcast listeners who were incredibly gracious and I suspect have some great stories to tell.
I'm sure they do. And that's why we are going to hopefully get in touch with some of you folks. Yeah. We're kind of fishing around, Fatty and I, right now, searching for more stories. You just heard Fatty's stories, about an hour's worth there. We don't expect you to come up with that much, but if you have a cool story about your experience at Leadville, if you think you have something interesting to tell us, something unique, something different, something that surprised you, something that wowed you, and that you'd like to share with other people, and you're not afraid to be on a podcast.
Yeah.
You also can't be afraid to be told no, too, because we could say, doesn't quite fit. But if you'd like to be talked to about your story, tell your story to other Leadvilleites, we'd love to hear from you. So why don't you just reach out to us on the comment section of our page, the Leadville 100 podcast page, or email Fatty at fatcyclist.com. He'll be happy to go through all your emails and read it.
Oh, yeah. I love getting that kind of email.
Hey, look, if we find a couple stories, if we find one, maybe we do a podcast with one person. If we find more than that, we'll do more. We have this is the great thing about the podcast world, folks. It's all up to us. There's not a network standing over us saying, you got to do this many shows or you have no shows left. We can do as many as we'd like. So you could be a show. Again, it's Leadville 100 Podcast and Fatty at fatcyclist.com are the two places where you can drop us a line, tell us your story briefly, and if we love it, we may make a show out of that.
Yeah. And
all right, Fatty, as we put the wraps on this one, and it's been one, you have yet another Leadville story. This makes 22 stories for you now.
Oh, that's a lot of stories.
That's a lot of stories.
And I do want to say to our listeners, thank you so much. This has been an interesting experiment. Hottie and I had no idea whether we would get 5 listeners or 500. We've wound up with multiples of both of those numbers and are super happy every time we hear from someone saying, hey, you made a difference in our race, or you made a difference in my training, or you inspired me to try something new and different. Thanks tons for listening to this show and participating in this little podcast experiment.
Mm-hmm. And remember, direct your friends to the show. The episodes will remain there if you hear of somebody who's interested in trying the Leadville Trail 100. If you need to go back and review how to do this race, these shows will stay up and stay around for as long as you need them. Just direct everyone and anyone to Apple Podcasts, Google Music, and, of course, our home website, Leadville100podcast.com. And even though Race Days has come and gone, subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts does help us. In fact, it'll help others who've caught the endurance cycling bug find this show.
Yep. And it'll help the sponsors who paid to keep the show alive while we did it. And they certainly deserve your support. So thanks for doing that, folks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, everyone. Finish or not, buckle or not, thanks for listening. And we'll see you at the start line in 2019.
I'm going to bed. Good night, everybody.